This is Sybert signing into Red Alert Remastered on the map North by Northwest, which is why the minimap looks like a compass. On the left side, playing as the Cyan, this is rawsteel. He's playing allies. And on the right, playing as the yellow, also playing as the allies, this is IamDyNaMic. We are going to be checking out, I think, 3 or 4 replays in between IamDyNaMic and rawsteel. These might be just like ladder games. These, I don't think these are like, you know, a tournament series or anything. These are just like random games played. But I saw a couple of them on the replay system, and I was like, hey, IamDyNaMic. He's number 1 player on the ladder right now. rawsteel is, you know, top 5, top 10. Let's take a look at some replays, all in a sequence between these two guys, and see what we can see what we can learn. Maybe we'll see some great action. It's just going to be all riflemen, all infantry, all the time. And Dynamic losing a little bit of ground there to rawsteel. It looks like rawsteel has the numbers advantage over Dynamic. He's going to be able to put out a little bit of damage on Dynamic, and Dynamic has a little bit of a swell of infantry coming in, but it's going to be up to who gets that war factory out, I think, a little bit sooner if they can start getting those crushes on those riflemen. And of course, sometimes the riflemen just bust through and go for the kill on a building anyways, and rawsteel is getting pretty close to those kind of numbers with his riflemen squad, so we'll have to see if he's able to actually do that. Dynamic has his tank out, rawsteel has his tank out, so it's going to be 1 medium tank versus 1 medium tank. They are going to be able to start chipping away at the riflemen of the other guy, and there's the big crushes. rawsteel may just trigger a big attack from this point on. He's going to be losing his medium tank, but is that enough to give him the gall to step forward? He tries, and it just goes horribly. The crushes are good enough. And yeah, that's the thing about having your infantry all clumped up like that, is they just get crushed, which is usually what happens to me. I just lose all of my infantry because I'm not very good. rawsteel, on the other hand, much better, but also sometimes makes mistakes. He steps forward, he gets overwhelmed, and it's going to be 3 versus 4 tanks. Now, one of them from Dynamic is a little bit low. rawsteel going to try and jump on the weakened tank and take it down. It's going to be 3 tanks versus 3 tanks, but reinforcements may be a little bit closer from Dynamic. The numbers are still on Dynamic's side, but soon they're going to switch over to rawsteel as he cleans up another one of Dynamic's tanks. 2 harvesters are here, but they're safe for now. Dynamic losing the tank fight 1 tank at a time. rawsteel starting to change his target. He thinks he's got an advantage, and he's gonna try and press it as he goes for the harvester. An additional tank pops out for Dynamic. Reinforcements right here on the front line, and there's the pillbox. Now, rawsteel may have given away too many tanks in this situation. Now that it's like 5 tanks against 1, rawsteel trying to switch targets, thinking he's going to get a kill on a harvester and get ahead in the eco game. Ended up losing too many tanks. And with being this close, the reinforcement path is almost the same for both of these guys. I think they're both at 2 war factories. Yeah, so Dynamic, as long as the production stays the same, Dynamic will stay ahead in the tank count. And there almost isn't anything rawsteel can do about that. He's going to try and run past the tanks of Dynamic. He's going to try and go for the infrastructure. But at this point, I think it might just be too few of tanks from the rawsteel side. Goodbye that last tank. Dynamic has all of the power, and that will do it for this game. Game number 1 going to Dynamic. rawsteel selling off his MCV. And I didn't even notice, but that will be the end of this match. Dynamic wins game number 1, but let's find out what happens in game number 2. Which takes us to the map Bullseye. In the south as the Cyan, as the allies, this is IamDyNaMic. Going for that barracks, going for that infantry scout. Meanwhile, on the top right-hand side, as the yellow, as the allies, this is rawsteel. I believe playing England and Germany. So Dynamic is Germany and rawsteel is England. I believe. I don't actually remember what the benefits were. I used to know all that stuff off the top of my head, but I did indeed forget, having really just been playing Switch games. Just been playing some Breath of the Wild because I play old games, so I guess I do pretty much exclusively play old games. I'm playing Command and Conquer, and then Switch games that are like 5 years old at this point, but I just got. Couple of riflemen coming out from Dynamic. He's going to be able to jump on a couple of riflemen of rawsteel. Get a couple of kills there, but pretty inconsequential so far. We'll have to see how these guys choose to play this. Some people just stick around in the outer ring of the bullseye. Some people try and brave the middle ring and get a little bit closer to those jewels, those gems in the very center of the map. rawsteel and IamDyNaMic kind of cleaning up their riflemen, the riflemen of the opposing player from around the map, 4 and 8 kills respectively, as they clean up those scouting squads and try to deny their opponent that little bit of vision. rawsteel may now try and curve around to the north and get a second field within his grasp, expand on his ore that he's got under his control. Rifleman doing a bit of damage, but again, not too much to worry about. Definitely a bit of a slower pace on the map bullseye as compared to North by Northwest, where they were spitting distance from each other, and the infantry were pretty much clashing right from the first moment. In this case, it's taking them like a whole 2 minutes to get up to light tank production. I mean, how crazy is that we don't have an absolute slaughter in the first 12 seconds of the match? rawsteel cleans up the rifleman. Let's take a quick peek at the vision of both players. So not as good as he would like IamDyNaMic, but rawsteel has got pretty good vision all over the map. He can see almost everything. So rawsteel will have an advantage in that sense to be able to see exactly what is going on from his opponent. There's a second war factory going down for rawsteel. Same thing for IamDyNaMic. Both of them closing in on kind of their natural expansion ore fields. All right, rawsteel is going to be going right for the harvester. He's going to say, I don't care about your tanks. I just want to kill this harvester. He may get one harvester. IamDyNaMic is going to pull the harvester up to the north, and rawsteel is going to be able to go for this round and for the kill. And now he's going to try and get on at a dodge. He killed one harvester, and he's going to try and escape. Sometimes that works out. You kill a harvester, and then you play a little bit defensively, because if you kill a harvester and you're down on your tank numbers because your opponent was killing off your tanks, and then you try and go offensive, it usually doesn't end up working out. You got to play a little bit longer for that to work out. In this case, it's mirror matchups, I think, all the way down. The 3 or 4 replays that we're looking at, they're pretty much all mirror matchups between these guys. And neither one of them has quite... No, I take that back. They have reached in the north their natural expansion, so rawsteel is starting to diversify. So he's got a couple of more options for his harvesters. They're not all bunched together at once. IamDyNaMic is going to be able to jump on one tank. He almost gets a kill there. He gets a kill on a different tank, actually. And good surrounds of these tanks by IamDyNaMic. As you can see, surround and destroy. Cut the army off from itself and pick off the weak tanks to quickly eliminate them. As I say that, he leaves 3 extremely low health tanks, and he cycles up to the north. He's going for the kill of the engineer. This signals perhaps an MCV sell-off. Yes, that is exactly what it signals. So a bit of a cash boost to rawsteel, but he's got no more buildings coming out, and this harvester getting hunted down. IamDyNaMic going to be going for a second harvester as well. He's maybe even will be sacrificing all of his tanks to be able to get it. No, he still has 4 tanks left, as rawsteel has been unable to kill off the tanks of IamDyNaMic. 4 tanks will manage to escape even with the reinforcements coming in. IamDyNaMic still has a couple of tanks left over with no MCV and with low harvester numbers. IamDyNaMic has put rawsteel in a bit of a tough situation. IamDyNaMic himself hasn't quite got out to that expansion location, and it looks like IamDyNaMic may have also sold off his MCV, so he is kind of in a similar position. Might have to sell off a couple of those silos to be able to get through the next stage of this game. It's low numbers of tanks versus low numbers of tanks. There's the crush. 4 tanks versus 4, and the health bars are kind of trading sides on both teams. Reinforcements coming in for both players, but rawsteel has got a slight edge with the tank number. Even though he just lost an extremely low health one, he's still got the slight edge with the tank number, doing a good job of shutting down IamDyNaMic's tanks, keeping IamDyNaMic's numbers low, and in the same way, the IamDyNaMic was jumping on the tanks of rawsteel. rawsteel is now doing that to IamDyNaMic. Low income for both of these guys, but constant tank production regardless. There's a sell-off of those silos by IamDyNaMic. He's going to try and regroup. He's going to try and maybe play a little bit more defensively. And rawsteel, he's got these three refineries rather, but on those two different sides of him. Meanwhile, Dynamic is just going to be getting further and further away from that ore with his refineries as he harvests more and more. A couple of medium tanks here. It's all light tanks on the side of Dynamic. He's going to try and rush past the tanks of rawsteel and maybe go for the infrastructure, but he's taken so much damage as he tries to get past the tanks of rawsteel. He's going to jump on the medium tank, jump on the second medium tank. No, he doesn't quite finish off the medium tank. He goes instead for the harvester. And Dynamic's tanks last so long despite all of the fire coming in from rawsteel. And somehow Dynamic he hasn't quite done it yet, but he cleaned up a harvester and he cleaned up a good number of tanks as well. Dynamic somehow pulling out these tank battle victories against rawsteel, and Dynamic surrounding the medium tanks, going for the kills, able to pull them down with just his light tank numbers. And Dynamic may have done it. He may have finally busted through rawsteel and just go for the kill. 3 medium tanks versus the 5 light tanks of Dynamic, and Dynamic has reinforcements coming in as well. rawsteel is going to try and hold off, but Dynamic just bypasses the defensive tank, and he's going for the harvester in the north, or maybe even the war factory, but either one is a good option as he's going to try and chase down this harvester of rawsteel. And Dynamic, he may actually get the kill. I don't know how many other tanks he's going to have. I believe that blue tank. Yeah, these tanks keep changing color on us, but not actually sure who owns all of these medium tanks. I think I thought some of them were mislabeled, as that bug sometimes happens where a unit gets the wrong color. But in this case, they are all correctly labeled. Dynamic just has more medium tanks than rawsteel, and that will do it. Game number 2 goes to Dynamic. This guy is tough to beat. Good show from rawsteel, but in the end, it was not enough. So let's jump into game number 3. And that takes us to Tournament or Rift. So in the long history of Command & Conquer tournament named maps, we have one here for Red Alert that is Tournament or Rift. So a little bit Tournament Deserty, a little bit Tournament Rifty, and I guess it's a left to right like Tournament Rift, but I don't know, it kind of feels Tournament Deserty with the split of these resources here, and then these other piles in the middle, which are a little bit thinner. Anyways, on the left side, up 2-0 in this series as the yellow, this is Dynamic. And on the right side, as the cyan, this guy has been showing some good games, but not quite able to take a win. This is rawsteel. Again, not a real series between these two guys, but some fun games to see in sequence, to see how they react to each other and how they progress over the course of a couple of games. Dynamic going up to the north, rawsteel going down to the south, but of course they're both going to be base creeping in the opposite direction to get to their sort of natural expansion. 5 ore nodes in the south, 7 in the north for Dynamic, and I assume it's sort of mirrored on the other side for rawsteel. I hate that stupid bug where if you use the hotkey, sometimes it just doesn't actually toggle the UI correctly. I guess it does toggle it, but it doesn't disable the way it should. Kind of an annoying feature, I suppose. Someone will probably say that that's how it was in the original, that the UI was an annoying piece of garbage, and so that is staying true to the original. But of course, we have to live with it. A couple of light tanks coming out for Dynamic. He's going to be putting some pressure out on rawsteel pretty much from the beginning. He's going to be harvester harassing way down here in the south. rawsteel should have something to deal with this. He's gone all the way up to the north, so he's got some additional harvesters going on. Losing one wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world. It would be a setback that he does not want to suffer. But at the same time, did he just go? He went 4 harvester and he's got nothing else going on. So this is kind of surprising that IamDyNaMic is going to be able to jump in here and put a serious amount of damage on this Harvester, and that Harvester will be weak as the game goes on to potentially get sniped, even if IamDyNaMic doesn't kill it right now, which I think he's about to. He gets the kill on this Harvester, and then he can just progress on further north, continuing to harass, continuing to do a bit of damage here and there, and he's even got a reinforcing tank going to be coming in. He's going to have 5 light tanks up here, as IamDyNaMic is going to be losing 1 tank, but rawsteel is not able to stop the bleeding as another Harvester goes down. More reinforcements come in here for IamDyNaMic. rawsteel spending all of this cash early on to get those additional Harvesters up to get that eco rolling, and it's just not quite working out for him. Still 3 tanks remain for IamDyNaMic, and he's going to get 1 more Harvester. Reinforcing tanks coming in for IamDyNaMic. He's down in tank numbers, but he's not looking to have a straight-up fight with rawsteel. In this particular case, he's going to run down a little bit further south, maybe take a couple of more shots off at that Harvester, and no, he does just straight up run away. He leaves, but he sees the MCV being sold off, so he knows the state of things. IamDyNaMic himself is going to be keeping around his own MCV. He has done that same base crawling expansion, and he has got 2 war factories up and running. Now, of course, rawsteel just got a bit of a cash boost and infusion from that MCV cell, but what can he really do with it? We'll have to find out. I think it's going to be 3 Harvesters, maybe versus the 4 or 5 of IamDyNaMic. How many does he actually have? Just 4 for now. He might try and sneak out a 5th one before too much longer, but he's just going to continue to pump those light tanks. Both players low on cash. rawsteel with no real options. Where he is where he is, and he can't do anything else about it. I mean, he can build more Harvesters, but I don't know that that would necessarily be the best choice. He's going to try and play defensively. He's going to try and just hold the line and win out the war of attrition versus IamDyNaMic. He's got a pretty good setup for it. He's got the infrastructure that he needs. He just isn't where he would have liked to have been. IamDyNaMic is going to jump on 1 tank, a little bit of force fire on the ground there for rawsteel. He's going to be losing maybe some additional tanks here as IamDyNaMic closes in. A couple of low health tanks extremely close to death for rawsteel. IamDyNaMic jumps on them, cleans up, and now he's going to go for the war factory, and that is a bit of a signal of a death spiral for rawsteel. His production is going to be slower from here on out. IamDyNaMic doesn't actually have to win right here, right now. Even striking down a power plant or killing the barracks would probably be enough to seal the deal and, like, guarantee the win. IamDyNaMic's reinforcements aren't stopping, though. He's going to go for the throat right here. He's not letting up. He's not stopping the attack. And again, even if he doesn't win the game right here, right now, he's still almost guaranteed to win out in the long run, but it isn't even going to be that long as he continues to shoot down the tanks of rawsteel. IamDyNaMic is so good at that surround and destroy, that divide and conquer, if you will. And that is it. The riflemen are trying to do what they can, but rawsteel at this point has so little going for him unless he has a major attack heading to the other side of the map, which he doesn't. It is just pretty much lights out. He's still making a valiant effort to try and stop the bleeding, but the reinforcements don't stop from the side of IamDyNaMic. IamDyNaMic might lose a couple of additional tanks in this engagement, but even so, there's no production left for rawsteel, and rawsteel is just going to try and do it with riflemen. He's trying as he might, but the crushing is too powerful. And now with no production facilities of any kind, rawsteel is a done deal. IamDyNaMic continuing to just crush opponents before him and win game after game after game. That will do it for this match. Let's jump into our 4th and final replay between these two, which takes us to the map A Path Beyond. In the top left-hand corner as the yellow allies, this is rawsteel. And in the bottom right-hand corner as the cyan allies, this is IamDyNaMic. IamDyNaMic coming out ahead. Is he going to clear out these walls? He may be doing that with the rocket squads. A couple of rocket troopers to clean up the wall segments, get himself some gems a little bit faster. This map can turn so weird so fast. It's one of those maps that's so small that the games are often very fast and furious. I love how those wall segments turn sideways for no good reason and just turn sideways. Like, obviously, looking at the physics of it doesn't make any sense at all that shooting a wall would turn a different wall segment sideways like that. But it's just something funny to see. There's a refinery going down for Dynamic, and the exact same thing for rawsteel. They're going to meet in the middle of the map, but they are not going to have a friendly match. And a couple of riflemen on the north side. Dynamic might be able to put a little bit of pressure on that MCV, might be able to do a little bit of damage there. Pillbox going down for Dynamic, going to make rawsteel a very difficult task of breaking the front line of Dynamic. The Pillbox basically getting free damage on these rifleman squads, and there is rawsteel's second pillbox, but they're not quite in the same advanced position that IamDyNaMic's pillboxes are. They've both got a good infantry swell, and Dynamic is going to try and defend against this harvester or this refinery in the north as rawsteel tries to jump on it, but unsuccessfully targets it down, and the MCV taking so much damage. Oh my gosh, Dynamic with 3 riflemen might actually kill an MCV, and rawsteel is just getting picked apart by Dynamic. There's the push forward from them both. Pillbox is in the middle of the map, but there goes the MCV. Dynamic has killed the Pillbox advance, and goodbye. The Pillboxes of Dynamic are just simply superior versus the ones of rawsteel. The numbers are on Dynamic's side, the plays are on Dynamic's side, and now the War Factory will be on Dynamic's side if he ever actually gets up to that point. No MCV, no hope of rebuilding, but double barracks all the way for rawsteel. He is going to go so heavy into the infantry, he's going to go maximum infantry in every single direction, but it's going to be Pillbox and Rifleman to try and defend this area, and Dynamic is going to do absolutely fine. The refinery takes so much punishment from those riflemen, and in addition, pillbox may even make that position unassailable from rawsteel's perspective. Second pillbox like there or something might just be the ticket to hold that area forever. Unfortunately for rawsteel, he has been forced away to the ore to the south, and he is forever and always going to have just that one harvester, that one refinery. He's going to try and make something happen in the south. A big swell of riflemen. Dynamic is going to respond to it. He's getting so many kills with his riflemen. If rawsteel had been able to push past, kill that power plant, kill that MCV, he may have been able to pull something out, but at this point, there are so few options for rawsteel. He's still trying. He's still going to try and go for something. There's the additional pillbox in the north near that near those trees. Is probably an even more defensible position than the spot that I chose for it. So Dynamic, again, showing just how good he is by outsmarting me with his pillbox placement. He is going to get a couple of shots at those riflemen, even selling off a couple of pillboxes to get a little bit of extra cash. Rawsteel, he has got $0 in the bank on the account of he's got one harvester, and it has to drive so far to get any kind of harvesting done. Goodbye, all of the forces of rawsteel. An additional pillbox going down, and Dynamic is just absolutely slaughtering rawsteel. Even a pillbox going down in the south is going to stop this attack if it makes it through the riflemen of Dynamic. And rawsteel has fought the good fight, but there is just not much left for him. There just isn't many. There are no options. And Dynamic has outplayed him in basically every conceivable way. The pillbox is even starting to tear down the refinery. Not something you see very often, is pillboxes shooting refineries like this. Rawsteel still in this game somehow, some way. I mean, obviously without much of a hope of ever winning it, considering he's got literally no refineries, just barracks. They're most likely typing to each other, hopefully saying friendly things, maybe saying not so friendly things, as Dynamic just slowly pulls rawsteel apart one way and the other. There's a power plant going down. For a second, I was really confused, just barely based on the placement of that power plant, as to how rawsteel was managing to build stuff, you know, with no cash in the bank and no MCV. But goodbye, rawsteel. You fought the good fight. You put up some good games against Dynamic, but it was not meant to be. Dynamic absolutely crushing it in all of the games that we have seen of him. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and this is Sybert signing out.